to do first, brain. Appreciate that. Thanks. Pop out the chat. That over there. So, a little bit straight. Oh, there it goes. It's caught up. Now pause it again anyway. And that I've got too much going on. I realized I had all this video stuff going on. Definitely going to interfere with my bandwidth. So let me clean up some of this that I have going on in the background. I didn't, I just got home from picking up the groceries and doing the errands, and got everything. I should have gotten stuff ready for stream before I left, but I didn't. So I got everything together in a hurry. I might have missed some things. That's right. Close that. And we've got this open. We can leave that there. Bring this over to here. Not that any of you all can see that, but it doesn't matter. That you will see it, and so it will matter. Cool. Oh, and I need to close this after. Well, I need to read. They are not student emails. Y'all can't see that good. Double check and make sure that didn't think it would be, but it would be a big deal for me to even for a moment have student emails up on the stream. I would have to immediately end the stream, delete the bot. Anyway, welcome in, Matt. Good to see you. Wax on or wax off, whichever one you'd like. Actually, that's a glass half full or half empty kind of question. So when it comes to wax on or wax off, this, rather than it being a philosophically profound idea within itself, it's a reflective exercise which tells you something about yourself, in the same way that the glass half full or half empty exercise is supposed to give you an indication of how it is that you see the world. Good to see you. Welcome in, man. I hope you're doing well. Right, for example, we were treated as strange for our worship of trees, yet how is that strange that the colonizer worshipped the king or queen? Right, a human, just a human. Then the colony's worship of the king or queen. Ours makes sense as it avoids alienation. You can walk up to a tree right now. Can you walk up to a king? Yeah, absolutely. But also with the trees, there is a necessarily dependent relationship where one's direct well-being is directly tied. I live in a place where I have to burn firewood for 6 months out of the year to not freeze to death, right? My relationship with wood is very intimate, very personal, and it's one that is directly tied to my ability to survive in the climate that I live in. It seems like there would be some kind of reverence, if nothing else, right? But what has a king ever done for me personally, right? What has Donald Trump done for me and in my ability to keep myself warm, or to pay rent, or to put food on my table, right? Nothing. But the people that we worship, the icons that Western civilization worship, have all been empty things which didn't actually directly correlate, right? This is like worshiping the volcano and throwing the virgins into the volcano. Christianity really isn't any different, actually. And if you say, well, what about the child sacrifice that's in over here that isn't over here? Have you seen Christianity? Have you any idea what we are doing to our children when we indoctrinate them into a religion that teaches them to not think critically, to not ask questions, to not try to figure things out, to defer to some authority who's going to tell you what's right and wrong, some authority that's going to tell you how to live your life. Trump is a tree. If only Trump were as useful as a tree. Trees have actual use, not to mention real intrinsic value above and beyond. Trump has neither, it seems. Well, that's a harsh thing to say. Humans in general are thought to have intrinsic worth in general, or the capacity, rather. I could take an Aristotelian out there and say, well, humans necessarily have the capacity to be found valuable or to be found of worth. No, that's also still dehumanizing. And this is something that I was talking about on the last stream. My tendency to treat those that I view with disdain, the way that I treat them, I don't think is necessarily healthy. Actually, I should at no point be dehumanizing actual humans. Even as terrible a human as Trump is, as awful as Trump's living existence is for the rest of us, it's still I should be more careful about how I speak about that kind of thing, and how I think about that kind of thing. I should be more reflective, because it is a slippery slope. I don't think that we've had a lot of long conversations recently about the importance of habituation in our moral development as moral beings. One of the things that I have talked about is I think that most rationalist moral theories are wrong, just for a myriad of reasons. When we talk about deontology or utilitarianism or the other major moral theories that we generally are told are reliable or helpful, they're helpful tools in a lot of ways, but none of them really work as your sole mechanism for moral problem solving. And a lot of this has to do with the rationality aspect. When we build these rational frameworks, where the frameworks themselves are designed to abstract those ideas out of the material conditions, the actual particular moral situation that we're concerned with, then when we try to rearrange them and then cram them back in, it often doesn't fit. I've talked about this at great length. And Aristotelian virtue ethics skirts a lot of the problems that rationalist theories run into, because the moral problem solver is never detached from the particulars of the moral situation that moral problem solver is in. Right? They are a particular in the moral calculus, and where they are in the situation, all the particulars are all important for determining the morality. We can't abstract anything out. We need all of the context. And for Aristotelian virtue ethics to work for us, we need to be in the habit of conditioning ourselves to be a certain kind of being, a certain kind of animal that responds to certain kinds of situations in certain kinds of ways, habitually, so that you don't have to do a lot of thinking about the moral calculus or rationalizing about the moral principles. You become an effective moral problem solver by practicing solving the problems and thinking deliberately and carefully about how you are shaping doing is dehumanizing any other humans in any other situation. That's a bad habit for me to have, and for me to incorporate that as a habit into my moral problem solving will be problematic down the line. Welcome in, Street Cat Love. Good to see you over there on the YouTube side. I appreciate you being here. Let me go ahead and make sure that I'll give a shout out for Street Cat Love, who is just more than cute cats. There are absolutely cute cats on their channel, and you should go check them out if you like cats. But also, Street Cat Love is super based and has lots of cool information that you can get on their stream. So go check them out. Okay, good. Didn't do this thing yet, so let me just take a minute and fix this. Okay, good. Right. So, good. And it was, my argument in the article is that shouldn't dehumanize nature either. Right. Hey, yeah. Because we dialectically dehumanize ourselves in the process. Necessarily, absolutely. I completely agree. I could not agree with that more. Actually, that's the whole thing about materialism, Marx's materialism. You cannot touch the world without being touched, right? And so there's a consequence too. This helps to illustrate it. When you have people who are in wartime, who are combatants against other people who are in wartime, other soldiers, other warriors who are fighting against each other. When soldiers in that situation win, that is, they survive the military conflict by brutalizing or murdering the humans on the other side. Those people don't win. Those people don't win at all. I'm glad we got the LandBack one. That's the first time we've had the LandBack. Thank you, Matt, for showing off that. That's all right. And it's intended to work that way. It's on a long cooldown, but it is intended to work. If someone puts LandBack in chat, it'll automatically trigger it anyway. So the sound alert is triggered by this LandBack being put in chat, with or without the exclamation point. But now Matt's getting froggy with the commands. This is one of my favorite, right? This is well, I'm already distracted. Yeah, this is a good one that illustrates privilege. This one I have to give to Jammed Tomb. I should give her credit for this. For a long time, Jammed Tomb was my primary mod, and some of the commands really still have her flair in them. This one is really especially spicy, and so I should give credit. Thank you for shouting out Jammed Tomb. I appreciate that. So yeah. It's still good to see. And while I'm shouting out Jammed Tomb anyway, this is also her art. It's one of the pieces that I kept. And it's still an emote that I use all the time. It's one of my favorites. Oh, and this is working too. Cool. That didn't pop up for Street Cat Love, but that's because I have I have a special command for them. But if you give a regular shout out, I'm glad that this thing works. There's a way that I can customize that thing too, but that's still a little bit over my head so far as the Nightbot tools. Yes, I used to live in a yurt out in the middle of the high plains of Colorado. When I was talking about having to burn firewood 6 months out of the year to survive, I used to do that literally in a yurt. Out in the high plains with very little wind protection. We built a building, and then the wind flipped the building over on top of us while we were literally in the yurt. during a massive snowstorm. It was good times. Times. we we had some good times. The goal was we were going to build an intentional community out here. We were going to start growing food, and then we were going to open up this little camp where we would teach people how to come out here and grow food and live on the land. And we had such a hard time trying to figure out how to survive out here that that we never got past the growing food hurdle. We just had setback after setback after setback, and it's at some point you have to admit that you're licked and and direct your attention somewhere else, which is more or less what happened. Yeah, it's classic homesteader. We were not prepared, and it's wild. I spent like a year, more than a year, before doing anything, right? Thinking about planning, figuring out the kinds of things that I would need. But most of the plans that I had worked on, when I was thinking rationally and critically about what kind of skills and tools I needed to be able to survive, I assumed there would be trees, because most of the places in the world, that's how you survive, is by there being trees. Actually, speaking of the thing that Kinamatara brought up earlier, that there, a worship of trees makes more sense, right? There used to be trees out here. I guess I should take a minute and talk about why there aren't trees. The valley, the High Plains Valley in which I live, used to have lots of trees. Lots of Joshua. It used to be a massive Joshua tree forest, the largest Joshua tree forest in the northern United States. Used to be. But then the Mormons showed up as their manifest destiny, wanton push to tame the land. They ripped up all the trees and planted nothing but potatoes in this whole valley. So there are no trees left. It's just plains and plains and plains and plains. It's a big empty bowl. Thanks to the Mormons. Everybody I know that had a homestead has either gotten divorced or sold the homestead within 2 years of starting. 2 years is actually about what I would expect. Surviving for 12 months is admirable. Just, I mean, really it is. And Jammed Tomb and her partner and I, with a dog and 2 cats and some ducks and some chickens, we survived out there for more than a year. But when the second winter began, that's when Jam Tomb and her partner decided that maybe it would be better for them to be closer to the city, for their situation and for their needs. So and that completely made sense, right? They had to prioritize themselves in that way. Yeah, so we all could have probably made it to the 2-year mark, but it wouldn't have been worth it. Right. One person, a year and a half. Yeah, amount of work and sacrifice it takes to is not what a lot of people expect before they start. Yeah. Well, and I loved it. To be quite frank, it's hard. It's hard living, and it's hard work every day. But I had never felt more free in my whole life. For weeks and weeks and weeks, we would be out there, without going to town. We would go a long time sometimes, because it's a long drive and it's just you and nature and you have to survive. and you have to do it, right? And being out there where we didn't have very good internet connections, so I wasn't on Twitch or on Twitter or on Facebook or on any other social media. I was all day every day getting my hands dirty so that I could survive. And that is just liberating in a way that I cannot begin to express. It was an amazing and magical experience. But it is tough, and you don't really get a vacation from it when that's your life. And that's something that I think a lot of people can't do. It's not you don't show up to do a homestead like working a job. It becomes your life. That is your life now. Yeah, it's impossible to take time off with livestock, right? Even if it's just chicken and ducks. Every day they need something. They need water, and they need food, and they need care. If you're not collecting the eggs, there could be massive consequences, especially if you have a larger number of birds. Leaving a bunch of eggs around can have unpredictable psychological impacts on your birds. It's like you have to really care. You have to show the animals that you care about them, or they might suffer psychological damage. That's a real thing with birds, with fowl, right? That not everybody knows that it matters how happy your chickens are. In addition to free childcare, we should have free farmer babysitters for vacation time, right? Well, see, in a lot of homesteading families that are successful, the kids do a lot of work. They participate a great deal in the process, and it's not dangerous or hard, laborious work. You know, and this is something that is difficult for Western minds, I think, to sometimes wrap their head around. Well, that sounds like child labor. No, I believe that our children should have a closer, more intimate relationship with their food. Right? I think that children should be exposed to the skinning of animals and the preparation of their bodies for our nourishment. That's not traumatic for children to experience unless we make it weird. We make it weird by trying to shelter children from the realities of their living. The things which are necessary for their survival. Why do we make that weird? Rather than reverent, rather than respectful, rather than as a necessary relationship that we need to embrace and understand and to experience fully. Why be weird about it? Americans, what is wrong with you making things weird all the time? Only do a homestead if it was a family compound with everyone there. Yeah, and that's the next time that I engage in a project, and this is something Trashnomancer and I are still talking about here and there. Though I'm so grateful that you all of my friends on the digital sphere are so patient with me, and the fact that sometimes I just lose track of a conversation for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and that you're fine with me just picking up the conversation and carrying on. I appreciate that. And Trashnomancer is a great example. We have an ongoing conversation about that kind of project that I would be interested in moving to a place and being a part of helping to orchestrate, organize, put together, and put my hands on, get my hands dirty in that kind of project. But it would need to be more than one or two people, right? It would need to be a couple or a handful. Like, it would need to be enough people, right? We would need several hands. And those hands would need to be able to be dedicated to the project, right? And that would be that's something that they would be willing to do, right? So that's something that's still simmering on the back burner. Oh, I need to remember. This is something that I keep forgetting. This is still an appropriate weekly announcement, but I need to when I'm starting stream, I don't think about updating this. I need to make a note on my start stream thing. Not that I ever look at the checklist thoroughly. I go over it, but I don't really. Good. Like how we used to draw our Wenu family members' heads after they were passed away. It was preservation out of respect. The colonizers made it weird or turned it into profit, so we stopped. Yet we don't consider mummification in Egypt that weird when it follows the same logic. Right. No, absolutely. And then this is a really great example. Thank you for bringing this up. With the long A, thank you for that, Matt. I knew I was doing it wrong. Way with the long A. But then the other is au, right? Where now, because that A is just like au, follows regular. Oh, the first one is an ah. Wa no. Wa no. Okay. Thank you. Am I getting it right now? I'll defer. Okay, right. Okay. Far no. Okay, far from correct. Soft R. Okay. Fa no. That's what you mean. Fa no. Soft R. Fa no. Ah. Oh. Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So and that's a consistent. The WH will be a fa no. After they've passed away. Yeah, and this is it's perfect example of the way that imperialism assimilates. This is something that we haven't talked about at all yet on stream in a long time. The assimilation process of colonialism. So, as a mechanism of how colonialism works, when it encounters things, and I'll use Foucault. Hopefully that helps and doesn't muddy the waters. When colonial powers encounter other powers, other cultural ideas, right, that are contrary to what it is. What colonialism does as a process is it finds parts of this that it can take and make it part of itself, right? So it extracts from competing ideologies and competing ways of life. It abstracts certain kinds of ideas. And this is a really good example of how the Maori used to draw Vanu heads after they had passed away, as preservation out of respect. And it turned into something that colonizers were using in a profit-for-profit way, right? It completely, what's the word? It's why can't I think of the word? It perverts. There we go. It completely perverts the idea so that it becomes so alienated, so detached from its original meaning. And now it has become subsumed into this larger cultural process, so that any remnants of this other cultural identity, the competing cultures, are a reflection, right? This is the original source, but this takes it up and assumes it as the primary, so that the majority of people are exposed to this idea first. And these things all become shadows and reflections of what they had originally been, distorted through the lens of the colonizing power. And there's a number of I mean, really great examples. But that's a perfect one. So am I getting the pronunciation right now? Fano. And I'll have to make sure that I'm actually, because a lot of the consonants I've noticed are consistent in the word formation. I'm noticing a lot of patterns and in relationships with the words, in the same way that Sanskrit, I think, for those of you who are familiar with that, where there are patterns in the words that you can see the relationships and understand words relationally, even if it's a new word that you've never understood. If you know basic Sanskrit, you can figure out what the word is, because the basic structures have the meaning in them, rather than what's it called? The way the English is. In English, or in a lot of other languages that are like English, Latin, the words, well, Latin isn't a good example either, because there's a relationship, there are patterns in those, so Latin is not a good, but I can't think of, I don't know enough about linguistics to express what I'm trying to explain. There's a word for a thing, and I don't know what that word is, so it doesn't matter. One other thing I noticed was it's male, like, no, male, like, in Maori. That's, yeah, we're all learning. Ow. Oh. Ow. Mao. Ow. Ow. Ah. Stop saying Maori. It's Maori. Gotcha. Maori. Gotcha. Thank you. Ah. Is rolled. Maori. Maori. And that's an easier R to roll. Maori. for some reason than Kiamatara. So I mean, I guess the practice is paying off because that actually came out pretty all right. Maori. And it just takes practice. And thank you for being patient. Thank you for teaching me and sharing. Yeah, I'm terrible with the rolled R. It's when I took Spanish in like middle school. Oh my God, I'm so grateful for the patience of my teachers. Because I did a terrible. I was not a good student in the first place when I was in middle school and high school both. I was a terrible student. And boy was I white. um but yeah, I struggled with rolling my R's way back then. Um and then instead of actually learning Spanish, I took it in middle school, and then I took it again in high school, and I still barely know anything. I know a few words and almost no conjugation. What I understand about Spanish is very embarrassing considering that I've taken so much of it. Um, but then I took a bunch of German courses, um, and was able to speak German a little bit, kind of fluently, well enough, anyways, passable. I thought it well enough that when I met somebody from Germany randomly at a party, I was able to just begin speaking with them. They thought it was hilarious, and probably were making fun of me and them and their group of friends. But we had some good exchanges. It was a fun time. Fun time was had. At least they pretended like I was able to speak the language. Maybe they were just humoring me, and being really nice. Right on. So, oh yeah, so let's get back. I want to get to the article. That's gonna be the end goal. Let me open this. What you all can't see yet, but this. And there's something about this that isn't right. I don't know how to fix it. I mean, I do know how to fix it. It's just taking the time to do it. I guess that's what it is. There we go. Right. The Earth, the Earth is a foo. Is the oh, you guys aren't looking. Hey, are you? Yes. Okay. There we go. The Earth is a who is where we're gonna get to today. And as I had explained earlier, we're going to want to go through, or I have chosen today to go through, a few particular, kinds of, conversations to put this in context. Or I guess actually, I should say it this way, to help me understand, to put me in the right frame of mind and in the right way of thinking. There's a few things that I want to go through first. And what I want to talk about briefly, well, maybe not briefly. We'll see how much the conversation expounds. But what we'll talk about is the this divide that I'd mentioned at the beginning of stream in philosophy, between of ontological priority. So there's some metaphysics. Right, actually, yeah, that's a good way to go. Some metaphysics are going to operate with this within a certain kind of framework, making several kinds of assumptions. And those assumptions are that there is a material world, and that material world is informs how we understand knowledge. The things that we understand to be knowledge, the things that are true, in that we can use those true statements as think about the way that computers process information, right? They have a binary system. Computers operate with a binary system. Even as complex and complicated as all of our computers are these days, all of their operating systems still reduce down to a binary system. Yes, no, is, isn't, can, can't, does, doesn't. And everything is or is not in a certain kind of category in a binary system. And it uses the series of yeses and nos in order to process any information about the world. So, a materialist conception would likely assume that the way that we understand knowledge, what we understand as knowledge, and how we understand that knowledge to be useful to us as the faculties by which we apprehend the world and make sense of the world such that we can accomplish things in the world, is something which is informed by the material stuff that we find in the material world. That's going to be contrasted with this idea of that rather than our knowledge being the product or something determined by the material stuff in the world, it's actually the case that we understand the world in a binary way, in a pure, reasoned way, in that triangles have 3 sides, squares have 4, right? These concepts we understand rationally, and they must be as such. I'm hinting at Kantian transcendentalism, how we understand math to be the way that it is, and that the way that it works is the product of pure reason. Right, that we apprehend the world through a faculty of pure reason. But after that pure reason has been exposed to the material stuff of the world, that the pure reason changes and adds to itself in an ampliative way, to use Immanuel Kant's language, in that we can learn that we can take triangles and squares and we can add them together or multiply them, or we can divide, we understand what we can do with them and how we can augment them to make the material world different than it is. So these are completely contrasting ways of understanding our epistemology, that which the realm of understanding that allows us consciousness such that we can do stuff in the world. And this divide was left over after Immanuel Kant and still persists today, despite the fact that people like me find this distinction more or less meaningless. And this is, for me, it's a result of my pragmatism. And it's kind of funny that I'm a pragmatist, because I put so much emphasis on things like waxing philosophical, which seems antithetical. And according to some pragmatists, is actually explicitly antithetical, that I am an irrational person for holding both of these views. But I'm okay with that. I don't care. Because at the end of the day, I'm a pragmatist in that I can still get things done with the philosophies that I have and understand. And I think it matters more what we do with truth than how we get to truth. Because these competing ideas about how we understand the world or the material stuff in it or truth itself or how these things correlate to each other, that's how we understand the origins, the ontological priority of that which is sublime. Right? That's how we cut through the bullshit of the ideologies that we've built, which interfere with our ability to understand the world in concrete ways, hinting at the Zizek problem, right? That we live in this world of abstract ideologies that we have built, and when we try to peel back those layers of ideology, what we find is more ideology under it, rather than a material world that gives us any kind of sublimity or sublime truth about the world. And this is the postmodernism problem that I've talked about too, that we're in this cycle where we're seeking the meaning. And we're seeking the meaning within this prescribed box that has been given to us by culture and society, handed down by the past in culture and society, and that box is relatively empty at this point. Right? Or it's not that the box is empty, the box is overfull. The box is overfull with content and reference such that it all meshes into a meaningless milieu rather than being something salient around which we can coalesce and understand the same kind of ideas together in the same kind of way. Right, but I'm a pragmatist in that I think that this distinction and this seeking of meaning in our world is missing the point. I don't think it's a waste of time. That's almost what I said. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it's missing the point. Because the point of truth is to have meaning that we can do something with. Right? Trying to find the origins of that truth is not a meaningless endeavor. But also, what we do with that truth doesn't depend on the origins of that truth. So we can shelve this problem, and I think that we should. We, as in philosophy in general, all of these brilliant people that are having this argument back and forth about how we justify truth, need to get over it already and focus on more important problems like housing people and feeding people and in getting governments to give a shit about those things, right? I think that's really what academia should be focusing its time and energy and efforts on, not trying to figure out who's the most righty right pants in the righty right pants ivory tower. That's not getting anybody anywhere. If you want to prove that you're right, get some people fed. If you want to prove you're right, make the pudding. Make the pudding so that we can have the proof. Otherwise, we're having arguments up here in the marketplace of ideas, and none of that matters anyway. Right? Let's focus on solving some of the problems, some of the practical problems. And this is an odd thing coming from waxing philosophical, right? But it's also an important realization that requires some balance, because I think that for a lot of the last year, this is something I was talking about on my last stream, that I have been pushing myself too hard, and that I have been too output driven and too focused on constantly accomplishing things and constantly staying productive with my time. And I'm getting good at getting lots of stuff done, but I'm also burning myself out. And that's, you need balance. You need to be able to focus on the world's problems, right? But also to be able to step back and take some time for yourself and wax philosophically when you need to. And that's an aspect of my own philosophy that I've been neglecting recently, as being able to balance those better. So where is all this leading to? So, the reason why I bring this up is because I want to champion the ideas of Hannah Arendt a lot more than they get championed in other spaces. And Hannah Arendt is a philosopher who does a really good job of talking about around the problems that a lot of philosophy had, and in demonstrating that none of it mattered, right? And she's going to, in my opinion, be foundational for ideas of phenomenology, right? And that's any phenomenologists in the chat are going to be real upset with me right now, because phenomenology predates Hannah Arendt by 120 years or so. I think that's my that's pretty close guess. Right, but that depends on who we want to attribute it to and how far we want to go back. But let me remind you about the being Mr. Righty Pants in the Ivory Tower. That doesn't matter. Right. The point of what I'm getting at is that Hannah Arendt came along early in the phenomenological project, in phenomenology, and often doesn't get included in phenomenology or in Marxism. Right. If you Google Marxist authors, if you Google communist authors, Hannah Arendt isn't on those lists, despite the fact that she ought to be. Her conception of plurality does all of the mechanics that we need from Marx's historical materialism. Doesn't quite get the dialectical materialism in the same way that the subject becomes shaped. Well, hold on, let me because there's still a few of Hannah Arendt's works that I haven't finished reading, so I can't make that claim authoritatively yet. I hope by the end of this year, I hope by the end of next year, I forgot what month it was. I hope by the end of next year, or from a year from now is I think what I mean, that I will have finished reading enough of Hannah Arendt's larger works that I will be able to make that kind of claim authoritatively one way or the other, but I'm not there yet. But that's one of my next big immediate goals for myself, to finish reading Hannah Arendt. Yep. What Kiyamatara says, what we should really learn from them is the dialectical method rather than the orthodoxy, because then we can apply the method to new conditions. Yes, exactly, and that's the whole thing. Yes, with vita activa is the idea that Hannah Arendt wants you to take away from On the Human Condition. This is one of my favorites. Hannah Arendt is obviously one of my favorite philosophers, and that's one of the best philosophical books that I've read. It's just amazing. And I'll go ahead and say too, Hannah Arendt's On the Human Condition is foundational to my understanding of Marxism and communism and leftism and how to organize effectively and how to organize a just society and how to allow people to demonstrate in a politically democratic manner that allows them free voice and space to talk about what they want to talk about. All of that is Hannah Arendt. All of that is Hannah Arendt. Those ideas can be found in lots of other authors too. I'm not only basing all of those things that I've said extensively and talked about extensively on this channel. That's not only Hannah Arendt, but she covers all of those things. It's an understanding where you recognize yourself as an interpolated being, and that for you to do something about the nature of existence, for you to do something about the world, you need to wake up and realize that your activity makes the world as it is. You are a constituting consciousness in the Kantian sense, right? Such that the world is the product of your labor and your work and your ideologies and your beliefs. That's what the world is. And you need to wake up to your responsibility with the recreation of that world. If you take issue, or rather, to put this in a strict moral sense, the ethical language of it, if you believe that a better world is possible, that means that you have a responsibility to do something about that. That's what that means. And it's too bad Apolitical Daddy isn't here, because this is the I think for many people, the aha moment of actualizing what free will is really all about. It's understanding that if you are looking at the world and suppose that the world could be different, guess what? It's waiting for you to do something about that. The world is waiting for you to wake up and realize that you could make the world other than it is. That's what the world is waiting on. It's not going to be as you'd wish. It is going to be as you recreate what you have been given yesterday. That's what the world is. This requires... I already said that. And it's interconnectedness. So we exist in a plurality, right? You don't have any identity that wasn't given to you by a culture and society, right? This Descartes idea of "I think, therefore I am." Well, we haven't really delved into this very deeply, so let me take a minute and talk about this. Descartes paints himself into a corner. It's one of my favorite ways that a professor of mine has expressed is that Descartes is the first systemic skeptic. That is, that we're being skeptical about things in the world or our understanding of those things in the world, but we are not being cynical about this in that we reject everything, right? We're not being overly cynical, we're being systematically critical. But Descartes' systematic criticism paints himself into a corner. And from the perspective of himself painted in the corner, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind him that he's completely oblivious to. He's completely blind to. There's a whole philosophical world the other direction that he doesn't realize. So let's unpack that visual metaphor. When we're talking about Descartes' skepticism, this is being skeptic of your five senses, right? What you see, what you hear, that you taste, or that you feel, that you have experiences, that you're a body existing in the world at all, right? We can question all of these things. This is where we get the matrix problem or solipsism that comes from this idea, where we doubt all that can be doubted. And when we doubt all that can be doubted, we are left with stuff that can't be doubted. And one of the things, right, is that there is a doubter who is doing the doubting. Right? And as long as there is a doubter who is doubting about them being able to doubt, that doubter necessarily exists. Right? I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. Is that there is a doubting doubter means that necessarily that doubter is an existent thing, which exists in some time and place, somewhere in some world. Details beyond that, right? Whether you're a vat in a jar or whether you're plugged in like Neo in the Matrix, we don't know, right? Or Descartes is going to say, we don't know. Right? We can doubt those things, but we cannot doubt that there is a doubter who is doubting. And from this position, Descartes thinks that he has established a fundamental truth which cannot be doubted. And now, right, good, good, and now has an axiom that we can build other truths on. Here's where Descartes makes a lot of mistakes, is that when he supposes himself as an independent consciousness which can doubt the existence of all of the other things around that doubter, the thing that doubter is taking for granted is that it is an identity in the first place, that it doubts, how it doubts, that it understands doubt is possible, is something that is informed, and something that has to come to be learned. You're not born with the capacity to have this philosophical understanding of the world that René Descartes is going through with this method of systematic doubt. And also, one of the things that Descartes doesn't think about is the frameworks that Descartes uses for systematically doubting are frameworks which were given to Descartes by previous philosophers who taught Descartes how to use logic and reason and how to think about these concepts in the first place. So when Descartes supposed that he has doubted all of the things that he has doubted, he hasn't even started yet. He has barely even scratched the surface of things that he can doubt, right? Because literally every piece of knowledge and information that he is using to come to the conclusion, cogito ergo sum, are all social constructs that were taught to him by a culture and society that existed before he ever doubted. And that is without a doubt necessarily true. That there was a world of people who already existed, such that when Rene Descartes was born, there were people existing who could teach Rene Descartes how to not claw his own eyes out and how to feed himself and how to not crap his own pants all of the time, had to be taught all of those things so that he can come to the conclusion that cogito ergo sum. Right? You can't doubt all of that stuff away because it necessarily must exist for you to have any of those ideas in the first place, Descartes. Necessarily. Can't not be the case. See you, Matt. Good to see you. I hope you have a great day. We'll probably come over and see you over there in Noisy's space. Yes! That's a good joke. Thank you. You guess you could say that he put the Descartes before the horse. The Descartes. Yeah. So, but that's the mistake that Descartes makes, and that's why there's again that whole world of philosophy behind him. He paints himself into a corner, right? Where he's doubted and he's doubted and he's doubted and he's doubted, and he gets to a point where there's nothing else to doubt, and he goes, "Okay, cool. This is a building block for knowledge." Right? Except that when people try to do that, and for those of you who are not familiar with Rene Descartes, a lot of his meditations are justifications for the existence of God, or are justified by the existence of God. So as interesting as the meditations are, they're really not philosophically helpful for establishing some kind of axiom or building block upon which we can build anything meaningful. But it does give us a starting point if we turn and look the other direction behind Descartes, at his culture and society and the kinds of ideas that he was exposed to, such that he understands the world as an identity detached from the rest of the world. Right? So we can use Descartes and this spot that he has painted himself into to go backward behind him to actually get some valuable stuff. We can do the historical materialism and trace back the ideologies which informed Descartes' idea that he could be a constituting consciousness divorced from all other existent things in the world, which is not possible. Right. That's where I'm getting to, is that the lonely corpuscle, I shouldn't be throwing stuff out without explaining it. The lonely corpuscle cannot exist without a world which supposes that such a thing could exist. So I guess I'll explain the lonely corpuscle real quick, because it's a fun thought experiment. It's not supposed to be this long of an aside to get all the way back around, but it's fine. We're having a good time, right? The lonely corpuscle. The thought experiment of the lonely corpuscle is imagine a thing which exists in a universe all by itself. So there's a universe, and in that universe is only one thing. Nothing else, just one lonely corpuscle. And from this framework, we can ask interesting questions, like, does this lonely corpuscle have gravity? Because if you look up the definition of gravity, it has to do with the attraction of bodies in space to other bodies in space. And if there is no other body, if there's only one existent thing, does that thing have gravity? Does it have mass? And if it has mass, how could it have mass? Because then there would be more than one thing. If it had mass and weight in a time and place, it would have at least 4 things, right? Right, that lonely corpuscle now can't actually be a lonely corpuscle. That identity would have to have other things necessarily. So that the lonely corpuscle is kind of an interesting thought experiment that we can do some interesting things with. But also helps us understand the impossibility of Immanuel Kant's, or excuse me, Rene Descartes' claim, right? This idea that the constituting consciousness can be an existent thing in time and space by itself, right? That it can be a thing divorced from the rest of reality is a completely incoherent idea. Just absolutely. But has not left philosophy. Still to this day. Still, this is a problem in philosophy that philosophers today still are mistaking, are misunderstanding, are neglecting, are stumbling over, because it's still there. The problem is still there. We haven't come to terms yet with the negation of our identity as a meaningful thing, because none of us want to give up our identities. We want to think of ourselves as distinct egos that we have curated and built up and that we have established, despite the fact that everything you are, everything that you have, everything that you've learned has been the product of everything else, of everybody else. All of your victories and all of your achievements and all of your good things about all the great qualities about you, you owe those to everything else around you. You owe them to the world in which you've been given. You owe them to your friends and your family and your neighbors and your parents and the people that you've disagreed with and the people that have helped you understand how to navigate the world. You don't get to take credit for any of those things, right? For you to take credit, you have to embrace the world in the way that Hannah Arendt is on about and recognize your responsibility, vita activa, your responsibility of recreating the world in which you live, which is your responsibility, which is up to you to do something about, for you to wake up and realize that the world can be different. And for it to be different, that requires you to do something about that. Right, so we got everything. I think kind of full circled. And I think if I've done a good job, I should sound kind of redundant at this point with all of the ideas that we were talking about on Wednesday's stream, right? That there is no separation between the louse and the girl and the beach. They are one. It's one system. We can conceive of microcosms within the one, but really what we're dealing with are sets within sets, mathematically speaking, right? It's all just one big set. It's one big set, and we just decide how to categorize all of these different combinations of ideas in the way that we apprehend the world, and then recreate that world with our vita activa every day. To use the language that I'm more comfortable and more familiar with. So that's I think did I explain that that's part of what I was doing? I wanted to get to the concepts from Wednesday, but I wanted to walk through some of the philosophical ideas of Western academic philosophy to get to the same kind of conclusions. because those are faculties by which I apprehend the world, right? That's and when I flex those faculties and challenge them and stress them out in ways that they weren't designed to be used, I make those things more useful to me, more useful for understanding the philosophies of other people, of other kinds of peoples, and to be more open and receptive to the possibilities contained within those ideas. So that's kind of what you all have just witnessed over the last hour. We got into the hour and 30. Is me working through ideas over and over again in a number of different kinds of ways, using different philosophical languages and using different kinds of examples, but saying the same thing over and over and over again, basically. To me, right? I said lots of different things along the way, but to me, I'm just repeating myself over and over again, using different words to express the self same idea, just with different words. One thing I'm going to do, we don't have lots of viewers, it doesn't look like, but I am going to ask for money. I'm terrible about asking for money, about the whole shilling process, but it does help me pay rent and be able to buy groceries and things like that. I'm close to a Twitch payout. I've been sitting, I think, like 50 cents shy of a Twitch payout for 3 weeks now, since I got the last sub. Thank you, whoever that was that gave me the last sub. I don't remember who it was now, but if people like this content, or if you have the ability to contribute to the channel financially, that would be fantastic. Subs are okay. Bits are okay. I would actually prefer if you just went to Coffee and donated to my coffee, because that money goes directly to me, and then Jeff Bezos doesn't touch it. Well, it doesn't go directly. Coffee gets their cut, but it's a much smaller cut. Jeff Bezos takes a big cut. When you spend the $6 over here to get a sub, I get about half of that. Less, I think a little bit less than half of that. And Jeff Bezos gets all the rest. So, but that's okay. That's still a good way to support me. This is a better way to support me. And if you're watching on the VOD, feel free to go ahead and support me now. I'll absolutely shout you out and give you some love the next time I'm on streaming. But it looks like we've had plenty of time, plenty of opportunity. I'm just gonna move on. Good, chilling out of the way for now. And I usually forget to do it anyway. Most streams, I get to the end of stream and I'm like, oh, I'm about to end. Should I ask for money before I end? It just feels kind of weird and awkward if, just feel like, thanks for the money, bye. But okay. Well, so now the thing that we've all been patiently waiting for, we're gonna get to Kiyomatara's essay. The Earth is a who. The Earth has personhood is the subheading, the subtitle. Earth and the material the Earth creates, whether assisted by human production, such as paper, or on its own, such as bark, continues activities even as discarded or unwanted commodities. It is an actant or a being who acts, and its many forms produce effects dramatic and subtle. Doing more than existing, the Earth transforms, responds, participates as it shapes ecosystems, breaks down, regenerates, resists, and carries meaning. Breaks down, regenerates, resists, and carries. Really like. Okay, good. Off to a good start. Concrete subjectivity is a materialist analysis inspired by is this not a proper noun? By Maori? That's supposed to. So is that supposed to have a capital M? Yamatara. This materialism is not to be confused with consumerism, which is sometimes called materialistic, and in fact, consumerist materialism is hardly materialist at all. Good. Glad that you made that statement. Good. The irony in consumerism being considered a materialist lifestyle is that it is truly unmaterialist because it doesn't just rely on the notion of out of sight, out of mind, but out of sight, out of matter. The double meaning I have used here is deliberate, as hyperconsumption sees such discarded material as something that being out of their sight doesn't matter. I.e., it won't have any effect when it's discarded, but also that it is no longer matter as soon as it's out of sight. Wow, I'm going to reread that and unpack it again. Oh, this is the Maori word for life force. Thank you. So it's not a proper noun. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna train Google, right? No Google, you're looking up the wrong stuff. This is what I want. Right? That's how you train your AI. There we go. Good. And I'll add that to my my note. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I might need a little bit of help and guidance getting through this, so I appreciate you being here so much. Yeah, I wanted to reread some of this. The double meaning I have used here is deliberate, as hyperconsumption sees such discarded material as something that, being out of their sight, doesn't matter. I.e., it won't have any effect when it's discarded, as though it ceases to exist. Right. This is really very good. As though it's poof. This is. Or like, if you wanted to use a terrible example, a terrible analogy would be, I don't know if you ever saw that movie that Jack Black was in. Was it Jack Black where he invents the spray where you spray the dog poo and you just spray the dog poo and then the dog poo disappears? Does anybody know? Is that Jack Black? But it's not a good movie. It's a pretty terrible movie, but it's the same kind of thing. Pretending that there could be an easy solution to where we just, out of sight, out of mind, we don't have to worry about where it goes or what happens to it or what the reality of the situation is, which is a complete disconnect from our material existence in the reality where the stuff that we discard is now still there, discarded right around us. Right? When this is space is curated around us in a way architecturally that does this, that erases the problems This is the same way that the reason why we put prisons and criminals and things in these prisons that are isolated out away from society is because society doesn't want to have to think about the problems. Society wants to ignore the reality that the state is literally imprisoning people just to get them out of the way, right? That their humanity doesn't matter, that their problems don't matter, their existence is inconsequential to the system and to the society. They are a sacrifice that the rest of us require for us to live in these safe neighborhoods policed by police, right? That this illusion that we need the police to keep our neighborhoods safe from all of the criminals, who most of whom are just trying to find ways to feed themselves and clothe themselves and to survive in a world that is constantly trying to murder them, right? And then we punish those people, lock them away, sequester them away, so that the rest of society doesn't have to think about the material reality of that problem, right? And there's a lot of ways that society is designed, right? People like me who live in the imperial core in America, we don't have to see the heaping piles of clothes that end up in the landfills. We don't see the stuff that's shipped off to South America or Africa now that China is no longer taking our stuff, right? Most Americans don't have any idea of that China. Most of the pollution, well, I wouldn't say most, but a large percent of the pollution that they have is from us shipping our pollution directly to them. And then we blame them and demonize them and say, look at China bad. Look at how bad their ecology is. Look at how bad their pollution is. Look at how bad, and we literally did that. We talked them into it. We sold them all of our garbage, right? And then demonized them for the state of affairs that we helped to contribute, right? So I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but I think that there's this invisibling isn't just there's some libness to this, right? The libs that believe or whatever, but there's a lot more to this too, right? Clearly both of these are wrong. Consider a landfill. You're probably going to go and explain it. Probably better than I was explaining it anyways. Clearly both of these are wrong. Consider a landfill. Most people don't realize just how active their discarded material is when thrown away. Indeed, discarded material is so active that without intervention, a landfill can cause an explosion from all the generated methane. The earth is a constant actor, a being deserving of personhood, right? It's one that is in relationship with its environment, augmenting its environment around it in ways. By contrast, we'll treat corporations as material objects. Right, we were just talking about this. You had already written this in your essay, and we were just talking about this on Wednesday, that corporations don't really exist. Oh, that's right, you brought it up. You put that in chat, that capitalists and corporations are just pretend. They're immaterial ideas that don't they don't actually materially exist in any real way. Oh, gotcha. Is it the liberal individualistic dialectic, the Emmy, and this is the long A, Emmy, is Rekete? Am I butchering this poor person's name? With it's Ray, like the A is right? With the line over it. Hey, welcome in, DJ Che. Great to see you. Good. I hope you're doing well. get a shout out for DJ Che, who is an awesome comrade. And I often forget to say underscore. It's DJ Che underscore. Everyone, go follow DJ Che underscore if you're not already following them. They're a comrade. They're super awesome. Their streams are a lot of fun. I enjoy. Oh, okay. Get tea. Hmm. Get tea. Get tea. Okay. Ra. Not a. Okay. Ra. Ra. Get tea. Duck tea. Get tea. Get tea. Okay, good. Emmy Rockety. Okay, good. Thank you for reasserting of just practicing it again, trying to get me to get it. Good, thank you. By contrast, people treat corporations as material objects, and in most countries, a corporation has the same rights as a natural person to hold property, enter into contracts, and to sue or be sued. Right, so they have the same. Yeah, and this is one of the problems that we have with this course, and this isn't a critique of you or this at all, but well, because you're not even talking about rights. Well, you are, yeah, right. So because that's I have a hard time with this because the right to legal recourse when our rights are violated is not the same as having our rights, as having our rights. What we have in America is we have the right to legal recourse should we wish to levy to the state that our rights have been violated in some kind of way, which means that we have to appeal to some court or some attorney or some system which will then choose to recognize that we have such a right and then give us mechanisms for recourse so that we can make ourselves whole. This is not the same thing as having a right, right? I have a natural right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But that right is constantly interfered with because I have to pay rent, because I have to buy groceries, because I can't just go see a medical practitioner and get medical aid. I would have to pay money for that. Right? I don't have those rights in any meaningful sense. The only right that I have is the right to legal recourse to make myself economically whole. Right? There are some, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic now. There are things that aren't just about the economics, but this is a serious issue that in academia, in culture and society, and in the political sphere, we talk about rights in this powerful way as though we have the rights to do stuff, but we don't. None of us, well, maybe the 1%, has the right to just do the stuff that naturally we ought to have the rights to. All of those rights have been interfered with and have been put behind financial barriers by corporations and the state. We don't actually have any real rights. And this is a complete aside. This doesn't have anything to do with your work. It's just every time I see rights brought up, and then really what got me on the tangent is the contrast that you're drawing attention to here. You're already drawing attention to the paradoxical absurd way that we talk about having rights, and then corporations who aren't even existent entities in a material way have the same, right? They have the same rights that we do, right? And that should be a real indicator to all of the rest of us that all of our rights really aren't real rights, right? That it's just a pretend thing anyway. That what it is an empty facsimile of what a real right is supposed to be. And that's that I have the right to, and others in my culture and society recognize that I have that right. I don't have to appeal to anyone for me to do something. I just have the right, and everybody recognizes the right, right? But we live in a society where if I want to collect water, I have to get a permit from my state. If I want to build a home so that I don't freeze to death, I have to get permission from my state and then have somebody from the county come out and approve, right? I have to pay them money to come out here and be the boss of me. That doesn't sound like freedom at all. But, right? What kind of absurd bullshit is this? Hi, welcome in. Alinsky. Welcome to the chat. Good to have you in. Right. So anyways, let me go back to reading this. Thank you. By contrast, people treat corporations as material objects, and in most countries, a corporation has the same rights as a natural person to hold property, enter into contracts, and to sue or be sued. Yet corporations are at best reified abstractions. Where does a company actually exist? Its headquarters may exist in one country, yet its activities exist in another. Think of the extraction of cobalt in the Congo for Silicon Valley in the USA. This is a great material example, too. Really great. I like that you found a very specific, ongoing, major ethical issue that needs attention to demonstrate. That's fantastic. Yeah, without extraction in other countries, it would hardly exist. Many exceptions would have to be made to begin considering a company as a concrete material being, let alone a person, because in its form, it is an abstraction based on extraction. Right. I'm trying to decide if any of that needs to be unpacked further, but I think that you've really stated it quite concisely, and I don't think that there's anything that I can add on top of that, actually. If you don't understand it, then go look up what's going on in the world for point of reference, because this is it. Good. Under consumerism, consumerist materialism, material is consumed with almost no recognition of the violence of its extraction and the distribution. And you're probably going to do this anyway, so I'm just right now I'm just connecting the dots to the other things that you've already said in the essay. And you're probably going to go back and do that again anyway, so I'll just keep reading. This detachment from true materialism is deeply tied into the capitalist figure of nature as somehow an abstract. It hadn't occurred to me the extent and degree to which science and philosophy both treat nature as an abstract rather than as an absolute material concept. Right? Like I understood rationally, but it's kind of dawning on to me just how big and widespread that trend is, that habit is. That's a habit of philosophy, a habit of Western civilization, right? In the way that we were talking about moral habits earlier. Yeah, this detachment from true materialism is deeply tied into the capitalism figure of nature as somehow abstract. An abstract, it's abstracted from commodity value, is obsessed over. Land, however, is clearly material. Yet settler thought believes it has no rights, not deserving of personhood. And the only right regarding land is property rights over it. The land itself is not afforded rights, but why not? The land is a political actor. It can change entire societies, it feeds people, it even grows infrastructure, such as transport materials like rivers. Wow. Right. Yeah, it sure does, doesn't it? And there's a philosophical problem of fit there that isn't really a real problem, but um my conditioning, the way that I have been classically conditioned as a philosopher, is bringing something to my attention that is a kind of an alarm bell, that says that there's a problem of fit here. Um, I'm gonna take this. It's not really a real problem of fit. I'm 99% sure. I haven't thoroughly thought through it yet, but I want to come back to this. I'm going to put a pin in that, because you might talk about it and resolve it, and then it's not going to be an issue anyway. And again, I don't think it's really a problem of fit, but the classical training of my classical Western philosophy is going, well, there's something there. So we'll come back to that. Maybe one would argue that personhood should be reserved solely for human beings, but this requires an individualist metaphysical transcendence above nature. Hello again, Alinsky. Thanks for continuing to be here. I hope that you're learning something. And if you got any philosophical questions, feel free to chime in. All we do is talk about philosophy here, well, and some politics too. But you know, something in between those would be fine. Maybe one would argue that personhood should be reserved solely for human beings, but this requires an individualist metaphysical transcendence above nature. Okay. In reality, there has never been a time in any human's life that hasn't been intertwined with the earth. Yes. Yes. It's funny that you mentioned this. Something that you might that you might want to look into with regard to this, Kimatara, is trying to remember which work it is. It's Hannah Arendt again, and I want to say it's is it On the Human Condition? I've read this book so many times. If nature is a person, how do you make up for the power differential? What do you mean by power differential? History buff. Oh, welcome in. I didn't realize that you. Yeah, welcome in. It's good to see you, History Bob. I hope you're doing well today. It's good to have you in. So, if nature is a person, how do you make up for the power differential? What do you mean? What power differential and what needs to be made up in reference to the power differential? If you don't mind clarifying, thank you. This the one where she talks about. Oh, this is the. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It is the beginning of Hannah Arendt's The Human Condition. What she talks about is in 1957, an Earth-born object made by man was launched into the universe, where for some weeks it circled the Earth according to the laws of gravity. Blah 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 blah. Anyways, what she's talking about is humans landing on planets other than the Earth, and that this marked a transcendent kind of moment for exactly the reason that you're on about in this Kiyomatara, but also not, right? She talks about the astronauts that leave the Earth and leave the plurality that is the rest of us, right? Because that's what her thing is plurality. She does not. She's not going to give the Earth sentience or recognize it as a person in the way that you are. The plurality is still going to be the same kind of idea, but without that in-personed land space. But that's but her point is, even if those people blast off and are on another planet, and even if they settle on another planet and have children on that other planet, those children on that other planet will still not be divorced from the Earth and the plurality of the people that are here on Earth. Having come from here, this new place will still be infected, I think is the word that she even uses, will be infected for the rest of its existence with the root of from whence it came, the Earth and the plurality of the culture and society which made the astronauts, which were able to leave and take their ideas to some other place. It still has, no matter how far attached you get humans, no matter how far you try to remove them or divorce them or alienate them, they are still beings which are social, which are the product of their interpolation, and are always going to be. No matter where they go, no matter where they take themselves and their technology and their ideas, that this thing that you're talking about here would follow us even to the stars. Like we rely, this is History Buff says, like we rely on nature for life generally, and it seems strange to me that nature can be a person when we can't exist without it. Well, good. History Buff. Let's actually turn to this article. I'm going to leave that up. That we read on stream on Wednesday. Right. Let's this Maori philosophy is about how there isn't any kind of real meaningful separation between us and the way that we live on the earth and the way that we depend on the things that live within us. Right, so the article talks about we as, I should begin with this story. It's a really good story. Sitting on the beach as a young girl, the author talks about, I picked a squirming insect from my scalp and watched in horror as my own blood leaked out of its crushed body. Right, so in in this experience, the little girl sees herself as a being on the beach, as a discrete, distinct entity that is within the milieu of something else. And in this moment, pulls the parasite off of their scalp and realizes that she is an ecosystem for the louse in the same way that she is a person distinct on the planet Earth, right? The same relationship. So when you say we rely on nature generally, how can it be person when we can't live without it, right? Well, how is the louse a distinct identity itself if it can't live without us or the other creatures on which those lice or other parasites feed, right? We depend on the earth and the planet in the same way that the louse depends on blood from us for its existence. And the dependence doesn't change the identity or the distinctness of those discrete identities as groups of organisms or as distinct individual organisms, right? The relationship remains however we categorize or group or understand. So it would not in any way change the power differential if we recognize nature as its own person. It would just mean that we've been really immoral about it this whole time. Like that's really the consequence, I think, is nothing else materially really changes about the dynamics of the relationship or of the relationship itself. What changes is our understanding of the moral responsibility to act differently with regard to the ecosystem upon which we depend, that greater organism that we depend on for our own existence. And therefore, why should a louse be considered a parasite and I should not? And why should the earth be considered the earth and I should not? Thank you. Yeah. That's exactly, Kimatara. Well said, right? It's the same, or not that it's the same, it's not different. And I think that there's a distinctness to those, right? To those different phrases, to those different, we might have to bust out some Zizek after all. Right? Saying something is not different is not the same as saying something is the same. Right? There is a little bit of distinctness there when you say that something's the same or that they're not different. And in this relationship, I think that what we're talking about is something which is not different, right? Good. Well, absolutely. Thank you. It was an excellent question, and it was a great opportunity to expound upon what we were already talking about and to tie it back to this article that we brought up on Wednesday, which I was just waiting for an opportunity to do so anyway. So thanks. Good looking out. Or going the other way. Why should I be considered a person and the earth should not? Right. Right. Wow. Yes. It works the mirror way. And it should. And this is, I think, another indication of the limitations of the way that we have conceived of these relationships previously. Because relationships are not one way. Relationships are not one way. They are all always necessarily reciprocally dialectic. Relationships are necessarily dialectic. They are not one way. And a lot of the ways that we have thought about rights and personhood and these kinds of distinctness really are trying to enforce a framework in which relationships work only one way, right? We get personhood. Pigs and cats and sunflowers don't get personhood. And furthermore, the planet, the ecosystem, the trees, the lakes, and the rivers and the air, these don't get personhood. We do. We get personhood, and then we get to decide what that personhood means, and then nobody else gets any say. And you're right, relationships don't work one way. Metaphysically, that's just a true statement about the state of affairs of existence. Relationships don't work one way, despite the fact that for hundreds of years, philosophy keeps trying to insist the way that we understand has been trying to assert. Well, which one sounds self-serving? Anthropocentrism or what we're talking about? Because I think anthropocentrism is, yes, exactly. And I thought that that's what you meant. I was just making sure for clarification. Yeah, in that people think that only they matter. Yes, it is purely self-serving. It is. We might actually compare this to whiteness in some ways, right? White people understand that they have privilege, even the ones that pretend that they don't. They recognize that they have privilege and don't want to give that privilege up, is the reality for white people that maintain a system of white supremacy. They do so because they recognize that they get privilege and they don't want to give that up, even if they don't want to openly admit to it or recognize it in a rational way that they would have to come face to face with their own racism. They pretend and they lie to themselves. They self-deceive. They employ strategic ignorance is a great philosophical term that I think does a good job of encapsulating the idea. It's not conceivable that any white person is walking around in this world in which we live and they cannot see the racism all around them. It's simply inconceivable that white people can be embedded in this system of white supremacy in which they get a whole bunch of advantages and everybody else around them gets disadvantaged proportionally as a direct result of their advantage. It's inconceivable that they would not see this. For them to not see it, they must employ strategic ignorance so that they can go out of their way to avoid seeing the truths which would make them necessarily come to the conclusion that they live in a white supremacist society and that they are benefiting from it and that they are recreating it on purpose. But they can't come to terms with that, so they employ strategic ignorance so that they can feign ignorance to the rest of us about their racism. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Welcome in, Jugosh Villain. It's great to see you. Hope you're doing well today. But yes, it is a very heavy-hitting phrase. And there's sometimes there's a misunderstanding about the phrase where people believe that we're talking about strategic ignorance in a way that absolves those people, right, of their ignorance. We're not saying they're ignorant and so they get a pass. we're saying they have to have their attention, their conscious attention has to have identified the truth of the information such that they can effectively ignore that, which means that they have to know it as true. They have to see it and recognize it for what it is for them to systemically, so effectively block themselves off from that knowledge. So it's a very deliberate, very active process that people go through. It's a very heavy-hitting phrase that conveys a powerful meaning. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Let's bring this back. We have a few people that have showed up since we started reading this. So we have Kiyamatara here in chat. I keep butchering their name, and they're still being very patient with me. I just cannot roll my R's very well. I'm working on it. I'm practicing. But they've written this article. Oh, and I can share the link. You don't mind if I share the link, right? So you can follow along and read this in the Substack if you'd like to. And I bet Kiyamatara wouldn't mind if you subscribe to their Substack, right? I'm making some assumptions. Good, yeah. So, and we're reading through this. It's Maori philosophy that is also substantively reinforced with a lot of really great philosophical ideas. So I have a tendency to focus more on the yeah, good. I thought you would appreciate more subscribers. The Maori philosophy rather than how it fits with the Western academic traditions, because I'm highly critical of all Western academic traditions. But also, as I was explaining earlier, that's also how I've been trained, is in those classic Western academic traditions. So I have a hard time sometimes seeing the world in not that way. But so we're going through this work, reading the essay. It's really been fantastic so far. There's been an awful lot to unpack. So maybe one would argue that personhood should be reserved solely for human beings, but this requires an individualist metaphysical transcendence above nature. And I agree with that statement. I think that we don't have the moral standing to appoint ourselves as being the morally superior is not quite the word that I mean, but it is the word that I mean. That we have constructed morality in a way that there is a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is almost binary. Right? We are persons. Everything else is not. Right? And for us to do that, we would have to transcend nature, right? For us to do this, to make this metaphysical claim, this is a true statement. For us to make this metaphysical claim, humans would have to transcend all of nature. And what even that means, right? What would that even mean? Humans can't. And if any human that did would cease to become human. There's a categorical paradox there, right? That probably cannot be overcome. I believe necessarily. In reality, there has never been a time in any human's life that hasn't been intertwined with the earth. One could argue that consciousness or self-awareness determines personhood, but would this exist without the water that is required for the brain to function? Oh, wow! I hadn't thought about it quite on that level, too. All right. Yeah. One could argue. Wait. Argue that consciousness or self-awareness determines personhood, but would this exist without the water that is required for that brain to function? Indeed, it would not. Therefore, personhood or being is a relational act, not an individual possession. Yes, yes, and this is the reality of personhood, right? When I teach personhood in my ethics course, one of the things that that I try to stress is that what personhood is a constant renegotiation that moral agents have with their moral community. That's what personhood is, because you can't. Okay, personhood is an idea ineffable in the same way that the concept of God is ineffable. There is no series of words. If you put personhood here, personhood equals X, right? If you are using this, thinking about this logically, unmarried man equals bachelor, right? If we think about identity and meaning in this direct relational kind of way, identity equals identity. Personhood equals, there is nothing, there is no series of words, there is no extensive, exhaustive list that you can make about what personhood is that will ever sufficiently explain the actual thing itself, right? That's what I mean by ineffable, in the same way that God is, the concept of God is ineffable. It's beyond comprehension. It's beyond definition. It's beyond any confines that we create for it. We are only waiting to overcome with our existence. It is inexplainable because it is something that we live out all the time, every day, that is not a static thing. It's a negotiation. What the definition is, what it equals, is a negotiation with and between all of the moral agents within a moral community. That's what personhood is. What does personhood mean? It means that you are necessarily deserving of some kind of dignity. You are necessarily deserving of some kind of moral consideration. If you are the kind of being that has autonomy, you necessarily have a right to choose for yourself how to direct yourself. These are natural relationships that we understand in a natural way. It's a deeply dialectical thing that doesn't have an end or beginning or borders or boundaries that you can put on it. What it is deeply dialectical. I'm running out of ways to re-articulate this. I haven't quite said enough, but I've run out of ways to articulate the idea that I'm trying to get across, and I think that most of us are on the same page enough. If you've been following along, hopefully you understand what I mean. Because this philosophy it's a little bit deep. It's a little bit complicated, and some of it really does violate some of our intuitions about identity. right? And that's it's one of the things that I changed in the title. I wanted to keep identity in there, and I swapped it out for morality. And this, a lot of this conversation today has centered around identity, and I thought that it would, but it has also, morality has actually been the center focus of most of the conversation. So right, yes. To understand how being is relational, consider how another person, someone other than yourself, perceives the color blue. This is a good example. I love this for phenomenological differences. This comparison shows that the experience of being is not merely an individual experience, but a relational one, right? You came to understand what blue is, not because somebody pointed to blue once, right? It required repetition and nuance for you to pick out the hues and tones and the shades and the differences that for you form the ends of blue, but not the beginning of purple, right? Or green, or whatever's next chromatically. This comparison shows that the experience of being is not merely an individual experience, but a relational one. Now extend this idea to land. Think about how a potato perceives the sun. Okay. One case involves cultural and neurological semiotics, other biochemical and ecological semiosis. Okay. Yet both of these show that existence is not solitary, but dialogical, right? No, a potato can't exist alone, right? Your constituting consciousness can't have gotten to the point that it doubts its own existence without having had all of the things, right? The potato can't exist without the soil and the nutrients and the sun, everything, right? Yeah, both these show that existence is not solitary but dialogical, a continuous mediation of signs across bodies and even kingdoms of life. This knowledge is a basis for Maori and Wakapata. And this is the WH here has a kind of sound. So this is Wakapata, Wakapata, Wakapapa. How much emphasis is there on the W, or does the W go away entirely? Wakapata, Papa, Wakapapa. Also, I'm not sure where the okay. And life force and interconnectedness of all things, including the earth. Right, I interrupted that. This knowledge is the basis for Maori, and that's life force. And Papa, the life force and interconnectedness of all things, including the earth. Right, okay, got it. English attempts the aforementioned transcendence above nature. A good example of this is their use of the word soil and dirt and negative connotations they place on it. Right, soiled is a dirty word, right? Such as soiled or dirty, yeah, right. By contrast, I could have just kept reading, huh? By contrast, Maori culture deeply respects the soil, understanding its importance as shown in the Whakapakuki proverb. Okay. Patak, pak, at, patakau, patatauki. There we go. Thank you, everyone, for your patience as I clumsily stumble over the words, and I'm just trying to practice them over and over, and I really appreciate everyone's patience with me as I'm just practicing. Good. He, toto, ote, hangata, hai, he, oranga, ote, hangata. When dua I oneona. E one. Probably, yeah, if that's he, ote, he. Right. So that's one, probably. Okay. While food provides the blood in our veins, our health is drawn from the land and soil. That's the proverb. While food provides the blood in our veins, our health is drawn from the soil. Right. And that's right. So you've got the one relationship here, and then the bigger, you got the one relationship here, and then the bigger relationship that goes around that relationship. In nestled within, but folding out too. And there's some of the quarry here too. That's the fern folding, right? The two, right? Good, exactly. And in the fact that the word for land in Maori, yeah, Maori. I keep forgetting. I keep wanting to default. This is the same problem that I have with Iran. When I practice pronouncing Iran, I can say it correctly. When I'm not thinking about it and I go to say it, I want to say Iran or Iran, or I can't. Anyways, you know what I'm trying to say. I overthink it, and then the habit takes over, and Maori, which is Wenua, is also the word for placenta and how we are known as Tangata Wenua. And I like that there's lots of repetition. You've done a really good job of including lots of repetition in here for people like me who need to practice with the terms and ideas. Agency in Maori is distributed, not confined to autonomous individuals, but emergent from the networks of relations. The land acts, the ancestors act through you. Right, okay, right. So now we're expanding out to it's becoming ampliative in the same way that manifold theory is being ampliative about the structural identities being the result of relationships rather than as distinct identities. Okay. Agency in Maori is distributed, not confined or autonomous or to autonomous individuals, but emergent from the network of relations. And to be a being is to have agency, presence, and the ability to affect and be affected. And the earth does all this constantly. Realizing agency is crucial here because to truly participate in another's being, You must recognize them as a being who acts, not as a passive object. Right. Other people are not your construction of them. They are their own people. That they are their own, and you have to engage with their realness in the world, or you're not having real, genuine relationships with them. You're treating them as an object, actually. Karanga can recognize that a river, a mountain, a rock may be an ancestor. This is why within Karanga you often can witness wailing or weeping, even if it's Karanga in relation to land. It is a deep respect for agency and thus true sympathy for everything with Maori. And everything has Maori. It's a deep respect for everything which has Maori, and everything, literally everything has Maori. Okay. Because agency is the active life force for all beings. If you sympathize with a river but treat it as a dead source, you are not in real sympathy with it. You are protecting human sentiments, projecting human sentiments into something you refuse to acknowledge as alive with agency. Huh. I was just taking a moment to ponder if this would change my perspective of anthropomorphizing, right? The process of anthropomorphizing some other non-animate thing. But it really doesn't at all change my understanding or perspective of anthropomorphizing in the first place. Which is why, going back to that thing that I thought that remember when I was like, there's a Western philosophy thing is sending off those alarm bells that they think there might be a problem of fit, but I'm like, I don't think that there is actually a problem of fit, and that's why I don't think that there's a problem of fit. I believe that there are different ways that people go about the project of anthropomorphizing, and I think that there is an objectifying way, which is exactly what you're talking about here, and I think that there is an inspirited kind of way. Right, which is also, you're talking about both. You're talking about both, so I'm not being clear here. But right, without respect for the agency is to make an object of, and in you are anthropomorphizing in a way that still leaves the object as an object. Right, if you anthropomorphize the dresser drawers, right, or whatever, then it's you're not, it, don't know how better to articulate the difference. I bet you're gonna. Let me just keep reading. I bet you're gonna. Agency of the land. Okay, so I didn't read that. Environmentalism without respect for the agency of the land is little more than hollow pity at best, or self-interest at worst. Right, and that's what I think it is. It's a kind of self-interest, but it's an extended self-interest. It's, you can have Yeah, I'll just keep reading. Similarly, pitying a human without acknowledging their Maori is a denial of their being as relation. Thus, true sympathy means recognizing and honoring the active relational agency of all beings. The true sympathy requires respecting agency because agency is the very relational life force that constitutes being. Yes. To sympathize without acknowledging agency is to deny the kinship network of living relations, reducing the other, human or more than human, to a passive object rather than a co-actor in the shared web of existence. This is in a lot of ways is directly answering some of the concerns that Apolitical Daddy was bringing up the other day in stream about free will. Well, not the other day. I brought it up the other day. They brought it up a month ago. I don't know. A long time ago. Maybe even longer than a month ago. I don't remember. But the problems with free will is I know it's all right. We got time. In the process of interpolation, as understood by in the process of interpolation, one is the product of their culture and society to a very extreme degree, to a not entirely determined, but to a very large degree. Right. So, what do I mean by this? When we are determined by our essential characteristic, what you can do with wood is different than what you can do with stone. Right? You can do amazing things with wood, but you can't achieve the same kind of strength or durability as stone. Even if you petrify it, even if you treat it, you can't quite get the same kind of thing. And that's a necessary thing because of the material stuff of which it's made. And the same is true for your history and your culture and society and your experiences. You can't make them other than they are. You can't pretend that you were born in Japan and that you have an affinity for Japanese stuff if you were born in America. You might like those things, and there's nothing wrong with liking those things. Congratulations. That does not divorce you from the time and place and culture and society in which you find yourself, in which you were conditioned in the first place to rebel against those conditions such that you sought out other kinds of things to identify with. Right? But that identifying with something else is a reaction to what you are exposed directly to. Right? So you are determined. You are very powerfully determined, almost entirely determined by interpolation. And this is where we get free will. This is the introduction of the ability for agents to recognize their agency, right? That there is a process of interpolation, that there is a process of ecology and a process of being in the world in which we find ourselves. But we have some kind of choice. We have agency. We choose how to feel about the way that the world conditions us. And if nothing else, that changes us. And that changes us in profound ways that recreates new actions and new reactions and new habits of existing in the world, right? It comes down to this, but it requires a recognition first of the determinedness for us to understand the power of the agency that we have. Is we have to understand the power and degree to which we are a product of processes, right? And going back to Descartes, right? You didn't just make yourself the way that you are. You didn't choose who and how to be. You have made choices based on the conditioning of the conditions the material conditions you find yourself in. You know, but there is some agency there. There is free will. It requires for you to recognize the extent to which you are a determined being, determined by the stuff of which you are made up. You are determined. You are immortal. You must consume calories or you will die. That is necessarily true. That is something that you cannot get away from. You are determined by that reality. How you feel about that reality is up to you. How you go about feeding yourself is within your agency. But you have to recognize first your determinedness to be able to really make the choice. That was a long tangent. Hopefully added on to it. Similarly, pitting a human, blah, blah, blah. Thus, true sympathy means recognizing and honoring the active, relational agency of all beings. True sympathy requires respecting agency because agency is a very relational life force that constitutes being, right, in any kind of meaningful sense. To sympathize without acknowledging agency is to deny kinship. The kinship network of living relations, reducing the other human more than human to a passive object rather than a co-actor in the shared web of existence. And this is very much of what we've been talking about too, with the idea of plurality and truth in a postmodern society. That it's a matter of relation. We have to come to some kind of consensus about the truth, rather than truth being a thing that exists. Interesting. Sorry, everybody, for the dogs losing their minds in the background. Hopefully it won't go on for much longer. Right, so, without this, you reduce them to bare life. That went away, actually. Looks like somebody stopped to ask for directions. We live out in the middle of nowhere. So it's not uncommon for people to stop and ask us for directions, for people to get lost. In fact, many times when people are here, it's because they're lost. All right, good. Without this, you reduce them to bare life, to a what, erasing their who. This is why pity without respect feels dehumanizing, as it collapses the person into an object of concern rather than a fellow being. Maori, then, is the attunement to another's being as a self-possessing, world-disclosing agent. Love this. This is similar to, have I talked to you, Kiyomatara, about Ubuntu or Omulabi? These are African terms encapsulating an African idea of personhood that really kind of reminds me of this. It's a personhood that or I'll start this way. In Aiken, in the Aiken worldview, and Aiken is a kind of it's a group of people in Africa. It's a group of people. Aikens in Aiken philosophy, um, beings, humans are born morally neutral, as morally neutral entities, and for them to I'll put the let me put the words in because they're difficult words. You're probably not going to be able to guess how they're pronounced. That it? Yeah, there we go. Omoluabi. And yeah, this is Yoruba. This is the Yoruban term, and then I'll give you Umbutu is the Akan term. Where did my chat go? What happened? I definitely clicked the wrong button there. And Umbutu is the other. I believe that's how. Yep. Oh, yeah, not quite. Or more commonly spelled there. So oh, and I need to leave that because the article is. And they're distinct philosophies. To be clear, let me be clear. They are distinct philosophies, but some African scholars put them in the same kind of category and compare them to each other because they're awfully similar in conception. And the conceptions are, again, persons or humans are born morally neutral. For one to attain personhood, for them to acquire omulabi, requires for them to act as a discrete agent among and between other members of their community in a way that distinguishes themselves as acting actors that care about others in the culture and society. And when one acquires omulabi, the sentiment is that others would look at that person and say, that person has omulabi, in that their humanity is caught up in my humanity, and my humanity is caught up inextricably in theirs, demonstrably. I can see from their activity that they are engaged in my personhood and respect for my persons, concern for me and for my membership in the culture and society, is how that person gets their personhood, is by caring about me and my personhood and how I fit in relation to my culture and society. And for me to get that is something that I earn from the interactions with others in the culture and society, who will look at me and recognize me as caring, as sharing in their personhood. So I really think that these are kind of seems like there's some similarities there, perhaps. To sympathize without, or I got to the end of this, right? Is the attunement to another's being as a self-possessing, world-disclosing agent. Objectification of another, and indeed of land, leads to the objectification of the self. Consider a household in the 1800s. There was only one person, the man, in this household who was allowed agency to vote, to spend, to bear arms, to own property, lots of other things. Yeah. This relation creates the objectification of the woman of the household as she has not been afforded the agency of the man. Right. So this is a way in which we are conditioned by Western culture and society to identify something as a right. The right to own property, the right to vote, the right to bear arms. Right? But these aren't rights. They aren't rights because rights belong to everyone. If it's something that belongs to only some people, if the ability to actualize this thing only belongs to some people, that's a privilege, not a right. Categorically, necessarily. And this is one of the paradoxes of how we talk about rights in rights discourse, even still today in philosophy, is that this dialectical relationship that you're on about clearly demonstrates the paradox of calling those things rights in the first place. Because they're categorically not the kinds of things that we should believe are rights if everybody doesn't have access to them. It disqualifies it out the gate. This relation creates the objectification of the woman of the household as she has not been afforded the agency of the man. I'm never going to get through this if I don't stop talking every other sentence. However, this relation is dialectical. Those who were denied agency begin to perceive the empowered individual not as fellow subject, but as an instrument, right? An extension of the power they themselves are refused. Especially in times of necessity, the person with agency becomes a mere appendage of the material need. I like that. Where the supposed right actually objectifies and turns that subject into an instrument. Good. That's really wow. Especially in times of necessity, not a being who acts. The agent becomes objectified as a means to access what the disempowered are denied: money, protection, and voice. Here lies the self-perpetuating nature of patriarchy. Nice. Men of the era often complained of feeling unappreciated as breadwinners, without recognizing that it was their own monopolization of agency that transformed them into mere appendages of bread. I love this. You had mentioned this earlier. You were talking about people becoming appendages of bread in one of the last streams, and I kind of got it, but now I get it. Right, I kind of got it before. I didn't think I misunderstood you, but now I get it. Good. To treat others as objects, to invite one's own reduction into an object. It creates an object-object relation or a dependent instrument relation, instead of a person-person relation. In this way, both sides become trapped in objectified roles. To deny agency to others is ultimately to become an object in itself, not a being who acts, but a functionary of others' unmet needs. And something that I find kind of surprising and baffling about this is what you have said here is not new at all. That this isn't new ideas. What you're talking about is the master slave dialectic in the what was it? No, it wasn't Immanuel Kant. It was even before Immanuel Kant, who talks about those who make slaves of other humans make slaves of themselves. What is that quote from? It would be subject who makes see if AI can figure out Stoicism is going way back. Could have been Hegel, but I doubt it. I can't remember who it is, but that's it's something that early on in the development of dialectics in master slave dialectics, that was something that was clear. Someone that has the power to coerce others, someone that has the power to coerce others. In so doing, if they coerce others in a way that they would not, that they would rather not be coerced, in that this agent becomes the coerced of the rules of objectification that they are placing on the other. They become subject to. Right. Well, and that's what I was saying. The surprising thing. The surprising thing is that this is not a new idea, and yet we cannot get people to understand this basic relationship that you are explaining here about patriarchy, and the perpetuation of patriarchy. It's further right. That it's the cyclical nature, the recreation is in that the one with power doesn't want to give up the power, but then they find this power not just confining, but limiting in limiting their freedom and their expression and their ability to be a free, autonomous, self-directing agent. Right? They've created for themselves their own bondage by the creation of the coercive relationship. Yes, I do. This extends to land and its materials too. Under capitalism, the earth is reduced to lifeless matter, while its ghost, exchange value. Oh, I really like that. Is propped up and incessantly pursued, while its body, real ecosystem, is exploited. Ghost is propped up, and that's what we talk about. That's what we refer to as the earth, is merely the specter, the ghost of the earth. When we talk about ecology and ecological priorities and environmentalism, we're really, even in those contexts, still only talking about the ghost. It's why that saying is true. No one is free until everyone is free. Yes, exactly. Good. Everything's coming full circle. I love it. This has consequences for workers, just as a household agency dialectic. There is a land dialectic. If the land is reduced of production,